Strategic planning is important to an organization because it provides a sense of directions and outline the goals. Strategy often begins with the idea, a simple intention to find a new solution. In a world that is open, it requires intelligence, energy, and passions. Even today, a large or small company, public or private, there are thousands of ideas that deserve to be implemented. With combining these factors, some of the ideas to implement a strategy become a project. These projects become a reality and they change the world. Hello everyone, my name is Mutiara.
And Karina, we are from Faculty of Economic and Business, University of Lampung. So we are going to talk about the chapter 7, which is implementing strategies, management and operation issues. But before we begin with the explanations, we're going to talk about the objectives first. Explain why strategy implementation is more difficult than strategy formulation. Discuss importance of annual objectives and policies in achieving organizational commitment for strategies to be implemented. Explain why organizational structure is important in strategy implementation. Compare and contrast restructuring and re-engineering. Describe the relationship between production or operation and strategy implementation. Explain how a firm can effectively link performance and pay to strategies. Discuss employee stock ownership plans or ESOPs as a strategic management concept. And finally, describe how to modify an organizational culture to support new strategies.
Successful strategy formulation will take a long way before it will be accepted and implemented in the end. Not every formulation can result in a positive way the company wants. There's no such guarantee for that. Let's face it, it will always be difficult to do the work rather than to say it. It is the same case as the matter we have here. Implementation would occur a lot of things to consider than it was just being formulated.
As we continue with contrast between strategy formulation and strategy implementation, here are several differences between them. Formulation focuses on effectiveness, meanwhile implementation focuses on efficiency. Formulation primarily an intellectual process, meanwhile implementation is an operational process. Formulation requires good intuitive and analytical skills, meanwhile implementation on special motivational and leadership skills. Formulation requires coordination among few individuals, meanwhile implementation with many individuals. That's why there are differences between the formulations and implementations which should be considered.
Strategy formulation concepts and tools do not differ for every type of company, yet it is different with strategy implementations. Strategy implementations are varied among different types and sizes of organizations. The activities of strategy implementation include altering sales territories, adding new departments, closing facilities, hiring new employees, cost control procedures, modifying and advertising strategies, and the last, building new facilities.
In a company, the transition from strategy formulation to strategy implementation requires the shifts between strategies who is in charge of the formulations to managers which are in charge of implementation. It is essential for divisional and functional managers to be involved mainly in strategy formulation activities, as it is also important for strategies to be involved in strategy implementation activities.
In the management of a company, there is also several issues. Management issues, especially in strategy implementations, include with this matter right here. The main priority is setting annual objective for the company. Then it will be followed by having the right resources and organizational structures, ways of restructuring the organizations, conclude ideas on how to stay on tracks, and of course, the company's operation strategy.
Let us begin with the annual objectives. Annual objectives itself is the decentralized activity that directly involves all managers in an organization. The active participation for these objectives will result in full acceptance and commitment. It is essential matters because it represents the basis of resource allocations, are a primary mechanism of evaluation, are a monitoring tool, and establish organizational, divisional, and department priorities.
In setting annual objective, there are a few requirements and criteria on how it should be included with. Annual objective should be measurable, consistent, reasonable, challenging, clear, communicated through the organizations, characterized by inappropriate time dimensions, and accompanied by commensurate rewards and sanctions. Objectives should state quantity, quality, cost, time, and also be verifiable.
Policies let both managers and employees know what is expected for them. Therefore, it will increase the likelihood for the strategies to be implemented successfully. They provide a basis for management control, allow coordination across organizational units, and reduce amount of time managers spend making decisions. It is also clarify what work is to be done and by whom. Policies also can be applied to all divisions and departments.
The next issue in management would be the resource allocation. It is the activity which allows for strategy execution. It is often based on political or personal factors. All organizations have at least 4 types of resources that can be used to achieve desired objective: financial resources, physical resources, human resources, and the last, technological resources.
Changes in strategy often require changes for 2 reasons. First, structure dictates how policies and objectives should be established. And second, structure often dictates how resources will be located. Since changes in strategy could lead some changes in organizational structure, structure should be designed to facilitate the pursuit of the organization. Alfred Chandler, on his book called Strategy and Structure in 1962, found the structure sequence that continuously happened, which are new strategy is formulated, new administrative problems emerge, organizational performance declines, then new organizational structure is established, and finally, organizational performance improved.
The strategy formulated have to be workable in a way that it won't affect organizations to take another alternative. But especially, what type of structural changes needed to implement new strategies? That is why we're going to talk about the 4 basic types of the organizational structures, which are functional, divisional, strategic business unit or SBU, and matrix.
First up, the functional structure. It is most used because it is the least complicated and expensive than the other structures. A functional structure groups tasks and activities by business function such as production or operations, marketing, finance and accounting, R&D, and MIS. The structure have its own advantages and disadvantages as shown in the slide.
Second, the divisional structures. Divisional structures generally form to motivate employees, control the operations, and compete successfully in diverse locations. It can be used in 4 ways: by geographic area, by product or service, by customers, and by its process. Along with the previous structures, it also has several pros and cons as shown in the slide.
Third, the strategic business unit. It is used to increase control and evaluations for operations. The advantage of this structure is that it makes the task of planning and control by organizations to be more manageable. Meanwhile, the disadvantages of this structure are: 1. It requires an additional layer of management, which increases the salary expenses. And 2. The role of vice president is often ambiguous.
Finally, the matrix structures. It is the most complex of all structures because it depends on both vertical and organizational flows of authority and communication. It has its own pros and cons as shown in the slide. And here is the example of the matrix structures.
We will continue with the next management issue, which is restructuring and reengineering, which have become regular in the organization. Restructuring, or we can call as downsizing, right-sizing, or delayering, involves reducing the size of the firm in terms of number of employees, divisions or unit, hierarchical levels in the firm's organizational structure, and it is intended to improve both efficiency and effectiveness.
Meanwhile, in reengineering, Firm uses information technology to break down the functional barriers and create a work system based on business process.
Last but not least, the resistance to change. Can be considered as the single greatest threat to a successful strategy implementation. Resistance regularly occurs in organizations in the form of sabotaging production machines, absenteeism, feeling unfounded grievance, and an unwillingness to cooperate. It could emerge in any level of the strategy implementation process. Although there are several approaches for implementation changes, there are three of them which commonly use. First, forced change strategy involves in giving orders and enforcing them. Second, educative change strategy presents information to convince people of the need for their change. And finally, rational or self-interest change strategy attempts to convince individuals that the change is to their personal advantage. When these appeals are successful, strategy implementation can be done easily. However, the implementation changes rarely to everyone's advantage. Managers can improve the likelihood of the success rate of implementation change by carefully designing change efforts. How? By providing the right of participation during the making of strategy, motivation, or incentives, and finally, a proper communication.
Strategy should strive to preserve, emphasize, and build upon aspects of an existing cultures that support proposed new strategies. Substantial research indicates that new strategies are often market-driven and dictated by competitive forces. Shine indicated that the following elements are most useful in linking cultures to strategy. They are formal statements of organizational legacy, designing of physical evidence, deliberate teaching, explicit incentive, stories, legends, myths, and parables about key people and events.
Production-related decision on plant size, plant location, product design, choice of equipment, kind of tooling, size of inventory control, quality control, cost control, use of standards, job specialization, employee training, equipment and resource utilization, shipping and packaging, and technological innovation can have a dramatic impact on the success or failure of strategy implementation efforts.
The job of human resource managers is changing rapidly as companies continue to downsize and reorganize. Strategic responsibilities of human resource managers include assessing the staffing needs and costs for alternative strategy proposed during strategy formulations and developing a staffing plan for effectively implementing strategies.
That's all we got for now. Thank you for your attention.